Glenn Harold, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me on.
Another Lagos resident here again today. And, it's like I wait a year for a hypnotherapist to come along and then two come along at once.
Right.
I've just spoke to my good friend, Matt Shears, who's also a hypnotherapist in Lagos. And you are too.
Yeah. So maybe we're gathering here for a reason. Maybe it's a collective rush to Lagos.
Well, we definitely are gathering here for a reason. There's something about this landmass here in Algarve, especially Western Algarve, where we are. It seems to be a magnet and is attracting the same kind of people, same kind of thinkers, and it's awesome. It's awesome to be around so many like-minded people, and it gives this podcast a new lease of life.
Yeah, it is. There are a lot of like minds here, aren't there? I've noticed that.
Yeah. How long have you been in Algarve yourself?
So we've been here. We left England about 8 years ago. We went to Spain and then we came here about 4 years ago and loved it.
There's quite a few people who go from Spain to Algarve.
Yeah.
I don't know why that is, because it's a little more expensive in Portugal than
it is now. I think it's the homeschooling is super strict in Spain, whereas it's easier here. We homeschool our kids.
That's right.
A few other rules that are kind of a bit looser here. I'm into crypto as well, so that's very it's not taxed here, so that's a good reason as well.
We've got a lot to cover today, then, haven't we? We've got hypnotherapy, we've got homeschooling, we've got crypto. So you've kind of built an amazing career as a hypnotherapist. Best-selling author, lots of celebrity clients, and you've made a good life out of hypnosis. Tell me, it's a subject that I'm really interested in anyway, is this idea that we can overcome our failings, our challenges, the things that are oppressing us through the power of our own mind, through controlling our own mind rather than external forces controlling it, I guess. And this tool known as hypnosis, which is, the word has itself has some like negative and positive connotations depending on your perspective of what it is.
Exactly.
So I spoke to Matt about this, and I spoke to other people who like qualified hypnotherapists or NLP practitioners, and it's a question that seems to not cause controversy, but it leaves it open to interpretation. Like, what is hypnosis?
So a lot of the negative association with hypnosis comes from the stage shows. That people have seen these stage shows where they might be on holiday somewhere and there's a stage hypnotist and he'll get people up on the stage and he'll click his fingers and make them do outrageous things. So people think the power is with the hypnotist. And to a degree on those stage shows, it is, because it's a certain type of hypnosis he's using to get people up on stage who he knows are very receptive to that kind of hypnosis. So he's looking, if he's got an audience of 100 people, there's 20% of that audience will be somnambulists. And they're people that will go into very deep trances very quickly and follow suggestions. And there's also something of an extrovert in those people. They want to do those outrageous things. They want to be the star of the show. So that's a certain type of hypnosis. The kind of hypnosis I do is where I'm using hypnosis to help people overcome problems. And you use a different type of induction. There's a certain amount of trust involved. And it's a much more therapeutic approach. So you've got the therapeutic side of things and then the stage hypnosis. And that's the real difference between the two. But most people's exposure is to the stage side where it all looks very powerful and like people are being manipulated.
Well, there's kind of a spectrum of the stage hypnotist, isn't there? There's the guy who will work a bar in Albufeira, right? And he gets the audience to eat onions, raw onions. And then at the other end of the scale, there's people like Darren Brown who are, demonstrating the ability to manipulate people or large numbers of people using these techniques. And I think if people are unaware of the power of hypnosis, right, then they can be vulnerable to people who do have that power or do have those skills. What's your take on that and about people's ignorance of what hypnosis is?
I mean, in a lot of salespeople these days are taught NLP techniques and how to win favor with people using certain language patterns. And also, there's something you can do that where you can gain favor with people by mimicking their voice and their actions and their tone. And what's that called? I forget the phrase.
Mirroring.
Mirroring.
Well, I've just done an NLP course.
Okay.
I was doing a video. It was the NLP Academy. Michael Carroll, who's based in Lagos.
Oh, is he?
Yeah, another one.
Yeah.
Based in Lagos. He'd run an NLP practitioner's course in Villagale, and I was lucky enough to do the video for it. So I got to see the inside track of how they do it, and that's what we were talking about, mirroring, mirroring the client or the patient, or whatever it is.
And what that does unconsciously, that builds rapport.
Yeah, which is another way for trust.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you're mirroring the tone and the way the person speaks and even the pitch and their body language, unconsciously you can build rapport with that person. So a lot of sales techniques are built around this these days. So it's good to be aware of these things, because if you know it, then you're not going to be easy to manipulate. So having that awareness of these techniques and things like that, you kind of keep your sovereignty.
Yeah, a really good word to use in terms of hypnosis is your personal sovereignty, isn't it? Because that's in some ways what you're doing with the hypnotherapist is they say all hypnosis is self-hypnosis, that it only really works if you give your consent.
Absolutely.
Yes. It's not like, you can do mind control unless, you're an MK Ultra victim, we'll get into that later. But yeah, for me, from a personal perspective, I've used hypnosis many times in the past, specifically for smoking. I was vulnerable to smoking. I don't know whether it's, my Irish roots and substance abuse.
Yeah.
No, but it was, I had the problems giving up smoking. I enjoyed it. I liked it, but at the same time, I had this black cloud hanging over me, which would give me, anxiety and negative thoughts about the whole process. And I tried everything.
Yeah.
I tried lots of different things. And in the end, I went to see a hypnotherapist, and it worked first session.
Right.
Blew my mind.
But you wanted to quit smoking. It to work. You wanted it to work, and you responded. So the best clients are those that are super motivated in the first place. Because if you have that motivation, then, as a hypnotherapist, I just feed back that, these suggestions when you're in an altered state of consciousness. So the key is to build rapport with the client, and then they respond to the hypnosis, to the induction. So you guide them down into a very relaxed state where they're receptive. Their unconscious mind is more open, and they're receptive to suggestions. And then when you deliver those suggestions, they anchor them in their unconscious mind and then respond to them at a later date. So when you wanted to stop smoking, the desire was strong. You believed in hypnotherapy, and that's the combination you need as a hypnotherapist in a client. So that's why it worked for you.
But what do you think is going on, though? I mean, what's this, mechanism or gateway that hypnosis is able to get through in order for us to be able to communicate directly with the subconscious, that it doesn't have a critical factor, does it? It just accepts what it's being told.
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, what do you think? How is that happening? How is the mere act of your words putting me into a state of altered state of consciousness that allows you to make suggestions that can change my behavior so radically, so potently within one session? What do you think's actually happening? Did you think it's a flaw in the human design? Right? Or you think it's a part of our evolutionary biology and it's part of our survival mechanism? What is it?
Well, if you think the classic metaphor for that is that the conscious mind is like, if you think of an iceberg, the conscious mind is very much the part above the surface. That's the part you see. It's the part we're engaging with now, the critical analysis part, where it's the left brain. And that's the part you see above the surface. But as human beings, we've got this huge resource below that, the unconscious mind, which is the greater part. And so we've got this huge resource below the surface that we only tap into when we sleep or when we daydream or when we use hypnosis. And it's kind of where our superhuman ability comes from.
Yeah.
And it's kind of unique to human beings. Most other species on this planet uses all of their brain all of the time. But we've got this huge resource that we don't use all the time. And when we do tap into it, we've got this incredible resource, this superhuman ability. You know, an example of that is where you hear that a kid will get trapped under a car and the mother will walk up to that car because something primal kicks in. She needs to save her kid and she'll pick the car up. She suddenly summons this superhuman ability because she doesn't stop to think that car weighs half a ton, I can't do it. That critical analysis part is bypassed. So when you get into this part of the mind and you plant suggestions in the unconscious mind, the transformation is quite amazing. You can, change addictive patterns of behavior around in 20 minutes. I've done it with, hundreds of people live and millions of people on my recordings. Mm-hmm. And it's something that is all about, as you mentioned, bypassing that critical analysis factor, the left brain, the part that analyzes everything we're told. And you do that by getting the person into a very relaxed state physically to begin with, and then mentally you calm the mind, you quieten the mind down, and you get them to drop down into that centered space. And when you're really in that centered space, your unconscious mind is naturally wide open and you're receptive to taking on board these suggestions.
Mm. It is the little example you gave then of the kid lifting the car.
Yeah.
There's quite a few of those, isn't there, in their own way, of describing these superhuman abilities that go above and beyond what our understanding of the physical materialist universe is, what we are meant to be capable of as human beings.
Yeah.
But yet somehow we dig deep into this hidden resource to demonstrate these extraordinary powers, which for me is just fascinating. What that opens up, the possibilities that opens up is, and if hypnosis has the power or the ability for us to be able to tap into these resources, its potential is almost limitless.
I once had this client session that has always stuck with me, where a lady came to see me and she had a fear of the dark.
Yeah.
And she couldn't sleep. And as she was getting older, she got more and more terrified of the dark and started to fear going to bed. This fear had just got worse and worse.
But she wouldn't wake up, maybe? Is that what it was?
It was, well, I got her into a relaxed state. It turned out she was very receptive to hypnosis and she really wanted to get rid of this fear. And so I regressed her back to the root cause. I sensed there was something in her past that was creating this fear. Because I always do the interview and then I do an induction, then I do a deepening process. But I knew the regression, I just felt regression was the right way to go with this client.
Past life regression.
Well, it turned out, I thought normally it's childhood.
Yeah.
But I regressed her back to the root cause and she started talking about this story where she was in an Egyptian temple and she was relaying these sacrifices going on in this dark place, and this colorful story came out, and I was thinking, wow, I'm onto something here. Sometimes the journey is strange. And then she started speaking Egyptian.
Wow.
And she didn't speak any other language but English in a normal waking conscious state, but she was speaking Egyptian, and she started talking. And I didn't know what she was saying at that point, but we'd got far enough along with the story, where the fear was coming up and out. And then she was speaking Egyptian. I let her process this thing. She was, started to get emotional. It all came up and out. I brought her back to full waking consciousness at the end. And she was, very disorientated at that point because I said, do you remember speaking Egyptian? She said, well, vaguely. Her conscious mind was back in full control. And she had this vague recollection that she was speaking this other language. And she came back to see me after 2 weeks, and this debilitating fear had completely gone, which is the end result. That's what you always want. The end result.
She was a mummy and she was in a tomb, and that was the darkness of being in the tomb from 2,000 years. She's been carrying that.
It was a real traumatic, terrifying fear that she'd been carrying around. And, I can't say for definite she went into this past life. You never know. But the story came up, and the fact she was able to speak another language when she was in that space was something that just, blew me away at the time. And,
I've done it myself. I've done past life regression, and I was a hypnotherapist in Liverpool, and it was incredible. It was like really amazing. I remember it vividly. I closed my eyes, took me deep, took me down, and the next thing, I was driving an old battered American truck in the 1940s, 1950s. I'm looking out of the window. I'm driving along a desert. I can see myself in the rear view mirror with like an Indiana Jones hat, but I couldn't see my face. Right? I'm driving, and it's just headlights on the road. Right, but then there was this foreboding sense of doom. Right, and I kept looking over my shoulder as if I was being followed, as if I was being chased, and this sense of doom and anxiety was building, and the car's getting faster and faster and faster, and I'm looking over my shoulder, and then there was a flash, and then total black. Right, total black.
So you had a crash and you died.
I don't know. Right, and then the next thing, I'll never forget this. In the sky, right, from the black, a white orb appeared. Come close to me. And it was like two beings of light, and then the next thing I seen a body of light being pulled up towards this orb.
Wow.
I was absorbed by it, and then I was flung out. And the world was spinning around like that, right? And I'm flying over the top of it, and then eventually I stop. At a house I grew up in now at the age of 4, and I'm looking in at myself, playing with toys, and he brought me out of it.
So from your past life to this life.
I don't know. I don't know, but I'll never forget that. Like, it was that vivid to me. It felt completely real. Now, I don't know whether that was me tapping into the deep recesses of my subconscious and drawing up, all of my life experiences to tell this narrative, and it had some meaning to me, or it was an actual past life. I don't know. I've got no idea.
I mean, if you're going to remember anything from your past life, it's going to be the most traumatic events, isn't it? So it makes sense that you would remember your death or something really big that happens in that life.
Or we're tapping into something. I don't know what it is. But I think we're tapping into something powerful. Something powerful, right? And it was because since we've had this materialist revolution, where God has been pushed to the back, hasn't it? Right? It's this idea that there is a divine creator that is responsible for everything that we experience. We've now gone to the the scientific materialism where those things can't happen. Those phenomena are discounted as the ravings of crackpot loons, and not given the serious contemplation that they deserve to be.
But you feel it's going back a little bit that way now, isn't it? Because people are not buying the material revolution. And the fakery of government and that. So people are looking for something more again, which is what we need, isn't it? We need to get back to that place.
Do you feel that in your work? Do you feel that you see that more and more with what you're doing? Because you're not just a hypnotherapist, are you? You also do meditation. Which is kind of more in the realm of the spiritual rather than the medical.
More so. Much more so. You're kind of, with meditation, I've made a lot of spiritual meditations. I spent a number of, a bit of time down in Panama at a shamanic retreat a number of years ago. And we were in the jungle, and we were, it was pure full on shamanic ceremony every day. And we were immersed in it, me and my wife.
Ayahuasca?
I've journeyed, not at that time, but I've journeyed with it a number of times, ayahuasca. I've had some amazing experiences on ayahuasca, really, life-changing revelations. And that, again, comes through to the unconscious mind through symbolism, because the way the unconscious mind communicates is through symbols. So when you're in an ayahuasca journey, you're seeing symbols, and at first they don't always make sense. But then normally what happens is those symbols kind of materialize in your unconscious and filter through to your consciousness, and you start to make sense of it. I'll give you an example. I had this one ceremony where I was deep in the medicine, and I was seeing all these fractals and geometric shapes. And then I got my paternal downline. I was seeing them like the faces in Mount Rushmore, the presidents. That I could see my granddad, my great-granddad as their faces in the rocks.
Awesome.
And they were saying to me, like, keep doing what you're doing because you're clearing the family karma. And I was getting this really strong message. And I found out later this is a byproduct of ayahuasca. I didn't know it at the time. So it wasn't like I could have manifested it. I didn't know. And they were saying, because my granddad, he was a bare knuckle boxer who fought on the streets for money. He was a gambler. You know, my paternal downline were, you know, a bunch of lads. And suddenly I'm 2 generations later, I'm in the healing business. So, you know, but they were saying to me, you know, you're actually clearing the family karma through what you're doing, the work you're doing. And it was really powerful. And I researched it afterwards and it started to make sense to me. I thought, yeah, I am, because my oldest son is also a hypnotherapist. He lives up in Meshli El Grande. Cool. And I tend to refer clients onto him now because he's full on and that's his work. He's 37 and he's like you know, an awakened man. He's spiritually minded. He's jiu-jitsu 4 times a week. He's got, you know, a beautiful father to his son.
Where does he live?
In Meshli El Grande, on the which is just not far from...
In Algarve?
Yeah.
Oh, wicked.
From Alvor, you go inland and it's up that way.
Towards Montchique?
Towards Montchique, yeah. And so looking at him compared to my grandfather, you know, they're worlds apart. And I'm one of the things I'm proudest of, that he's my son and he's such a, you know, awakened person, you know, a good man. And so, I thought you know, that ayahuasca ceremony showed me that you can do that. You can break that cycle, that generational curse, if you like, almost. You know, I didn't carry on the bare knuckle gambling and womanizing.
Let's not get too hasty. I had a guest on here once. It was a Zoom one, a guy called Darko Velchek, amazing healer, Croatian healer, right? And does amazing work. Yeah. And he was living on a boat in the Caribbean for 20 years, like a yacht, and got hit by a storm and wrecked his boat. And him and his wife said, what are we going to do now? And he said, for some reason, I've got a calling to go to Peru. Right. So he now lives in the middle of the Peruvian jungle. And that's where we did the podcast from. We did podcast from the Peruvian jungle, right? Yeah. And he was there to discover ayahuasca. Yeah. And he said, I've done it 51 times. Yeah. Right? And he said, in the last go, the ayahuasca said to me, it said, you've had enough. You don't need to do any more ayahuasca. You've got everything you need to learn from the vine here. Yeah. So that was his last go. Right. We've had enough of you. We give you the message. Off you pop, you know.
It's amazing. The shamans say that the medicine calls you when you're ready. Right. And when I came out here to Portugal, I journeyed a number of times before, but I got out here and we got settled. We were living in Boa Vista at the time. And I said to my wife, I feel like I want to journey again. Yeah, it's calling me. So I put a barbecue on Facebook. I had this old barbecue in the garden, needed to get rid of it, put it on Facebook. And this guy came along and I saw his profile on Facebook and he looked like a spiritual man. So I said, oh, like, it's yours. If you want it, come along. Sat in the back garden. And we just talked for 2 hours. He was wide awake. And it was kind of at the start of COVID. And he got the whole thing was manipulation and corruption. And we just talked for half an hour. And he said to me that he was running ceremonies along the coast in Silves.
Algeciras.
Silves,
okay, right.
Silves.
Yeah.
And he'd been doing it for a number of years. And I've been there a couple of times and journeyed there. And it's the most amazing space, beautiful. It's in a little valley, his place, and it's got a loco dome on it, and it's just beautiful. You come out after the ceremony, and the stars. You can see the stars because there's no light pollution, and so that was a case. You know, I put it out there. I was ready to journey again, and lo and behold, I sold my barbecue, and this guy came along, and I'm journeying again. Wow! Awesome. And it's like that. You put it out, and if it's right for you, then the door will open.
Yeah, you know? I think. It's a part of our history that is generally it's kind of covered up a bit, isn't it? Is our experiments with altered consciousness and using different, you know, psychedelic substances in order to facilitate a journey into the other realms. Yeah, you know, and I think it's definitely something that is becoming more accepted again. I read a book 20 odd years ago now called Breaking Open the Head by Daniel Pinchbeck. Have you ever heard of that book?
I've heard of him.
Really good book, right? Yeah. And I kind of credit him largely, or credit that book for beginning this new revolution of psychedelics being more accepted by society as a healing tool, rather than a recreational drug. And that distinction is quite important, I think.
Absolutely,
and I think it's now becoming more accepted that things like mushrooms and DMT and ayahuasca and iboga all have a part to play in our journey, in our narrative, in our understanding of who we are, why we're here.
And using them with reverence in a ceremonial setting. That's the way. I mean, I remember doing mushrooms when I was a kid and just getting off my face, going to a party and, causing havoc. But I would, now...
Was LSD when I was a kid? It's just, it's quite different than mushrooms, isn't it? You still have the strawberries, the trips.
The little microdots.
Microdots, they just go on too long, microdots. It was like...
They did it go, it's a whole 12-hour
job, wasn't it? Yeah, and the microdots.
You had to calm down as well, didn't you?
Yeah.
I had some amazing experiences on acid.
Yeah.
Even if, I remember one time with my mate, I was in a band and he was the singer and I was the bass player, and one night we tripped, we dropped a couple of tabs and we just tripped and we played Riders on the Storm.
Yeah.
The Doors song.
Of course,
They must have wrote it when they were tripping, because it's such a trippy song. We just played it all night long. But it also, as we were writing songs at the time, so it opened our creativity up. And the next day we were writing loads and loads of songs, because
it
that
unlocked
part of
something. Yeah.
It unlocked something, so it is that, I mean, acid is created in a laboratory, and, whereas ayahuasca is a plant and a medicine, I think there's a distinction there, because ayahuasca's got a spiritual element to it that opens part of you up and reconnects you to the source. Whereas acid, from my experiences of that, it's very much that you have something called positive hallucinations. So a positive hallucination is where you see something that's not really there. So when you're tripping on acid, you can see things, lizards crawling up the wall and elephants coming in the room and all that.
Yeah.
They're positive hallucinations, and they open up part of your mind. But I think with ayahuasca, you have negative hallucinations where you're able to see things that are really there. Higher dimensions, animal spirits and that kind of things, they're there, and the ayahuasca enables you to be able to see them. So I think for me, that's the distinction. And, with acid, I'm kind of glad I did it when I was young.
Yeah, I wouldn't do it again.
No, I wouldn't. Not now.
No.
But ayahuasca...
I had a few bad trips as well, but oh God, I'll never forget them. That haunt me still to this day,
Really?
But, yeah.
You've got to be in the right company, haven't you?
Yeah, it was Glastonbury, and I just done too much, and it was like, no.
At Glastonbury?
Yeah. It was all too much, and I had to go and hide in the tent, and the gap in the tent, and I was convinced people were looking in the tent at me, and I was like...
It's hot. And once you open up, you get on that road.
And it doesn't stop.
Yeah,
right? It goes on for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours, and eventually, you're praying to God to pull you through.
You just have to ride it.
Just have to ride it. Riders on the Storm,
Yeah, but Glastonbury, I mean, you're a brave man to do it there, because there's a lot of freaky people at Glastonbury.
Well, it was do you remember Claypole when we were growing up? Do you remember Rent a Ghost?
No.
I don't know how old you are.
I'm probably a bit older than you.
Okay, but there was this hippie in this green field up the top, and so with all my mates, and we were sitting around, and I was only young, and I was like, this is amazing. Look at this place. Wow, I didn't even know anything like this existed. And I was just totally consumed by the spectacle of Glastonbury at that time. It was a long time ago.
Yeah.
And I remember sitting around a campfire with a load of proper travelers, when travelers used to be allowed into Glastonbury, when they get in for free. It was before, Evis decided to turn it into a corporate event.
Yeah.
It was still a free for all, it was still the Wild West, Yeah. And I remember sitting around this campfire with all these crazy travelers, and one of this guy looked like Claypole. Anyone who's watching that remembers Rent a Ghost, he was a spit of Claypole, and he opened this box and he had this strip of microdots.
Yeah.
And he went, "This is for you." And he gave me two. Right? I'd done the two, and it was just too much.
Yeah.
It was too much. Yeah.
You really need to be with a couple of mates, in a good place. You can put on some cool music and then just journey with it.
I had to go and hide, man. I had to go and hide,
Yeah.
But in terms of what we've just kind of gone on a lovely journey there in itself, right? Is that, on the one hand, we've got natural substances that can bring us to an altered state of consciousness where we can discover things about ourselves that we may not have knew in normal conscious state. And then we've also got hypnosis, which kind of does something similar without any external aids, as it were. It maybe goes into a different realm, but still very deep and very powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're just tapping into people's natural resources.
Yeah.
And, all trauma that we carry comes from the past, somewhere in the past. So, something like hypnosis is a great tool for being able to clear a trauma, clear. And I know people in life who go through their life never ever exploring that part of themselves. And
why do you think that is? Because I know people like that too. And, I know quite a few people who would benefit massively from a session or two of hypnosis, but they're so resistant to either hypnosis itself because they're scared of losing control. Right. Or they're resistant or they're ignorant of what it is that's causing them the problems in their life and unprepared to explore it.
It can almost be that there's a few reasons behind that. It can sometimes be that their traumas were so difficult for them that they dissociate. So a lot of the time people, if they had a very traumatic incident, a part of the mind will dissociate completely to protect them, to stop them feeling that pain. But I think, when people are having a sense of awakenment, you realize that you have to heal those traumas to become your authentic self. You see a lot of elderly people that become very idiosyncratic and very warped versions of who they should be. Their personality gets more and more off kilter, and they get, and stranger as they get older. But we cut them slack because they're old. Whereas, for me, I had a really dysfunctional childhood. I was running away from home when I was 12. I started boozing when I was 13 rather.
Tell me about it.
I did everything I shouldn't have done, years before. And I was drinking. I woke up one day when I was 17, my skin was yellow and I completely smashed my liver to bits. And the doctor said, if you carry on drinking, you're going to be dead in 18 months. And, it was a wake up call. So, because of my childhood, it was so dysfunctional. It kind of led me into hypnotherapy. I realized I had to clear those wounds.
So you became aware that the reasons you were abusing substances was because you had something that you needed to resolve and something that you needed to clear.
Exactly.
And that led you to hypnotherapy.
Exactly that. And I knew that I was destructive. I knew I was destroying relationships with people. I was sabotaging on a massive scale. I was kicked out of school when I was 15. I was told I was the worst kid they had in the school at that age. And, I've ended up writing 7 books. So But, I was, and the only reason I was able to do that was because I cleared all those failure programs from my childhood. I believed for a long time I was stupid and I was no good and I wasn't going to amount to anything. My nickname at school was Prospects because I had none.
Wow.
I was really, but I was playing
in a way that gives you a point to prove, doesn't it? It's a driving, motivating force.
Well, that's what it did. I used that. I'm still trying to prove my headmaster wrong.
Yeah.
That's still in me. And I think I just was so fortunate that I broke out of that. I got out of the destructive habit. I wanted a better life. I didn't want to stay stuck and broke and, not having good relationships. So I kind of started putting it out there, and I was very lucky because I was driving a minicab in my late 20s, and one night I was driving home. It was about 4 a.m, and I had this epiphany, this awakening, and it was like, it was like a divine connection. Suddenly in that moment, it hit me at 4 a.m. My conscious mind was switched off. I was just driving home on autopilot, and I suddenly had this awakening that I wanted a better life, and something came to me. I still don't know what it was, but from that day on, I started to read. I went to the library the next day and I started to get books on spirituality. And the only one I could find was a book by Cliff Richard. And it said, Jesus, you and me. And I thought, well, I don't want to become a Christian, but it's a start, you know? So I read that, and then I just carried on reading these books, and I got into people like Stuart Wilde, who was a real great teacher of Eastern spirituality and Buddhism and Taoism. And just immersed myself in that and learnt as much as I could. I joined a group called the Kent Healers, and I used to go over to Tunbridge Wells, and it was in this little old lady's house. She was called Doris, and I used to sit there and do hands-on healing, and I loved it. And there was something in it. And there was a guy there that used to run it, a guy called Peter. And he, at the end of it, he used to say to me, right, I want you to do the meditation. He said, my guides are telling me you've got to do the meditation. And at that time, I was still racked with no confidence. I didn't like speaking in front of groups. And I said, oh, don't ask me again. But he said, my guides are telling me you've got to speak. And, you know, eventually it became my vocation. And,
amazing.
But he knew. So it's kind of like that.
So what do you think now looking back?
Yeah.
Right, you've got the benefit of hindsight and looking back at the past. What do you think happened with that awakening in terms of what do you think was going on there? What was driving and motivating you to go and search for your vocation? You know, have you analyzed it? Have you thought about it in any depth, or do you just accepted that's what happened?
I think it happens to a lot of people, you know, like, you know, there's something in you that's ready to wake up in this life. And I think when you sense that,
did you feel that at the time though, or was you just following your nose, do you think?
I was following my nose and I was looking for something better because my life was so, you know, rubbish at that time. And it was failure after failure that I was desperate for something better. You know, I wanted a better life, but I just didn't know how to. I thought it was just, you know, brute force. But I think because I was ready to wake up, and when that thing happened, I then went on a journey. You know, I was so fired up. I used to meditate every day for like an hour a day.
Wow.
And I was living in a tower block in South London, and I was putting it out there every day. I kind of learned about the law of attraction. And I used to put this thing out there that, you know, I'd been flat broke up to then, and I was driving an old banger. So I used to imagine driving an Aston Martin and living in a big house, having a villa in Florida. And I was living in this tower block, and I project it out there every day. And I was so immersed in that. And I believed it. I believed that by that point, I believed in the power of the mind. So I was just immersed in this work. And it was about 10 years later, I drove up to a showroom in Birmingham. I got the Aston Martin.
Wow.
And I remember the day I went up to buy it, an image that I'd saved at that time when I was living in the tower block jumped out of my computer, and there it was. And I thought, I spent years meditating on this, building that energy inside, and the external world responded, you know. So yeah, it was. So
what do you think? So it's like, okay, we know about the law of attraction, right? You use positive thinking, and you know, you're visualizing your outcome, but what is going on? Is this a hypnotic loop that you're creating and reaffirming? Like you're telling your subconscious, this is like what I want you to do. This is what I want you to achieve, and I'll crack on and do it. Do you think that's what's going on there?
It is. You're creating a new blueprint. So before that, I'd always believed that, you know, life was heavy, bad luck always seemed to happen to me. That was kind of a belief. So,
and was this a belief due to your upbringing?
Yeah.
Due to your class?
My upbringing, mainly my upbringing, because my dad was, he wasn't an unsuccessful businessman. We had a reasonably nice house in a good area, but I never saw him. He was absent. You know, he was always away from home. And, but it was, I knew that I could create new beliefs.
Yeah.
You know, and implant those beliefs in my unconscious mind, beyond my monkey mind, my left brain. I'd anchor them in my unconscious mind. And I knew once they were there, I'd automatically respond to them. But the other important thing with the law of attraction work is, if I hadn't done the clearing work, the sabotage patterns, if I hadn't got rid of them, and I've seen this with a lot of people, they take 3 steps forward and then 2 steps back, you know. You have to clear the sabotage patterns you've got from your childhood, and the beliefs that money only comes to other people, or you've got to be lucky to make money or to be successful. You know, a lot of people hold those beliefs because, you know, if you look back in history, it was the top 1% that had all the money, and the rest were just serfs who were, you know, doing the graft. And, you know, so there's a lot in our psyche, our DNA, that has those sort of beliefs, and a lot of people carry that. So you have to do that clearing work as well. Get rid of those failure programs and that belief that you're never going to amount to much. So I did a lot of work on that as well. And
is that part of your work, not only on yourself, as what you help other people overcome those limiting beliefs, the self-sabotage, this whole idea that you know, we don't deserve money, you know, that kind of thing.
Definitely. I love that part of my work because it was a big part of my transformation. I love giving that to other people and helping them to, you know, get rid of those things that are blocking you and holding you back, because, you know, you can, there's, you know, I saw a lady brought her daughter to see me one time, and this girl, she was 15 and she was just on the verge of getting expelled from school. And I always remember she came in and she was, you know, a fun character, but first thing she showed me her piercing. She's got a pierced belly button, and she said, "Oh, my mum don't know." And because I'd had, you know, I was a wild kid when I was that age, I built rapport with her, got on with her, and got her back focused on her schooling and got her motivated again, was able to really point her in the right direction. I remember about 3 months later, she got her results and she phoned me up in tears. Her mum was on the phone, and she was the top girl in the whole school out of 1,000 or however many took the exam, loads of kids, and she got 11 straight A pluses.
Wow.
So she had the talent in there, but she just was going off the rails, and she didn't believe she could do it. And, you know, so that was an example of how you clear those failure programs and those beliefs, and you bring out, you know, we've all got the ability to, you know, achieve amazing things and hidden talents within us. You know, I've seen that so many times with people where you draw out their hidden talents and their life just transforms. And we've all got it, you know.
It seems, you know, we're talking a little bit about trauma here and collective trauma as well, you know, as I went into that for a while, but, you know, I was doing a bit of research and I was speaking to some people on the podcast. It was some guys who were practicing and girls practicing German New Medicine. And that kind of focuses on trauma and how it can affect, you know, not only your belief system, but actually your physicality. You know, you can create physical issues from trauma. It really was fascinating, because before I looked into it, I just thought, oh, people moaning about trauma, people moaning about the past, people moaning about what happened to them when the kids. Come on, get over it. You're an adult now.
Yeah, right? I had that belief when I was younger.
Right. It's probably old fashioned or ignorant.
And old school, you know.
Ignorant. No, it's just I didn't know. Right. You know, that was what I presumed. Right.
Yeah.
And then I looked into it, and what's that guy's name? The Dutch guy wrote the book, The Body's Talking to Itself, or something like that. Anyway, it's the Bible on
Gabon Mate.
No, but he's good as well. But it was like one of the Bibles on trauma, and he explains how you know, this can cause physical problems, and there's ways you can, you know, clear it. And
emotional release.
You do the eyes like that. EMDR. Hypnosis and a few meditation was a big one. And it helps to clear, you know, these blocked pathways. And he was explaining it scientifically, not as part of like, this is an emotional trauma. He was saying that this is a blocked pathway. Your brain doesn't know how to get rid of this loop, and it keeps reliving the event, and you keep reliving what happened 25 years later in various, you know, life patterns, and you need to find a way to clear it. And it made me think, because someone else was talking about it, it was about how it would be in the interests of the power brokers to create mass trauma events, because as Rockefeller said, I don't want entrepreneurs, I want workers. Because entrepreneurs are competition for him, aren't they? He wants people doing the graft, like you said, you know, the elite at the top and the peasant class below. And the peasant class needs to be traumatized in order for them to not believe that they can be anything other than peasants, and that will keep them in the fields and keep them working for their entire lives.
Absolutely. And also dumbed down, unconscious. You know, if you think, you know, fluoride is in our tap water. Fluoride is a highly toxic substance. And what it also does is it shuts down, it calcifies the pineal gland. The pineal gland is a tiny little gland in the center of our brain that is our all-seeing eye. You know, you look back in history, and they used to paint the all-seeing eye on the walls in caves.
Eye of Horus.
Egyptians, Eye of Horus. That's the pineal gland. When that's open and active, your third eye is open and you see. You have clear vision. you're conscious. You know, the powers that be don't want us conscious and awake. So fluoride in the tap water is one way to do it. Fluoride's in all toothpaste, you know, you buy in the supermarket. I haven't used one of them for 30 years.
Me neither.
I use a 5-stage osmosis, reverse osmosis filter on my tap because fluoride is something that's so dangerous. But most people don't realize. They think, oh, tap water's safe to drink. But it's not, because if that part of your brain is shut down, you're much more easy to manipulate and control. And that's what we've seen over the last couple of years, in as clear as day. You know, we've been manipulated more than ever, you know, and the veil is now being lifted and people are starting to see what's going on.
Just because it's funny you should touch upon that, because I do have some experience in hypnosis and I do have some knowledge of it, is that when that event happened 4 years ago, when that whole mass trauma event occurred, is I was fortunate enough to be able to see some of the techniques that they were deploying, and it was quite clearly, you know, convoluted deployment of certain hypnotic NLP techniques in order to create mass formation hypnosis. As a hypnotherapist, someone who's done this as a career, was you able to see, you know, this mass manipulation of the population? What was your take on that?
It was so obvious what was going on. It was they were creating a massive amount of fear. Yeah, they were showing pictures of people dropping down in China, dropping dead in the streets. Do you remember?
Yeah.
And it was complete BS, wasn't it? Yeah. But they were pumping that out on the news. Everything you saw on the news was negative. It was fear, you know, this, and they frightened people to such a state that when they, you know, the solution came out, the vaccine, people queuing up for it. It was, I couldn't believe what was going on. It was like, and the strangest thing for me was I was seeing a lot of hypnotherapists falling for it. You know, so just because you know the techniques and that, it doesn't mean you can see what's going on. And I was having debate or arguments even on social media with these other hypnotherapists that were calling me a tinfoil hat, you know, and they were criticizing me. I'm thinking, can you not see what's going on? It's hypnosis. They're using hypnosis. You can't see it. You know, it was mad.
Isn't that strange? It's so blatantly obvious. So some people, you can just see it, right? It doesn't. You know, you don't even need to decode it. You've already decoded it from the moment they deployed it, and you've gone, "Oh, this is bullshit." And I did a podcast with Matthias Desmet, the author of Mass Formation Hypnosis, and he was describing, you know, how entire populations, if it's done correctly, can fall under, you know, a hypnotic mass hysteria. Right? And the governments, you know what they're doing with it, you know, because it enables them to move a large amount of people in unison together, to move from A to B, to get them to do what they want them to do. And it's not even an IQ test.
No.
Right, because some of the smartest people, so-called, you know, can go along with it, and some of the most common people, so-called, are aware of it. You know,
that was the interesting thing about it. That was so interesting. That, you know, I've got a cousin in Australia who's a doctor who's been criticizing me all along for, you know,
having a different opinion.
But she's been so indoctrinated in the system, and all of her kudos and her finances come from that system. So she cannot speak out.
There's a lot to lose.
So she's not going to speak out against that system. And I think, you know, it's like you said, you know, you were a rebel when you were younger, and I was. And I think, you know, those of us who were natural rebels kind of smelt a rat when we were younger and didn't buy into the system. So we naturally were the black sheep, and we fell off the wagon early. Because you're seeing through it all at a young age.
I was a veteran of government bullshit. I could smell government bullshit a mile off, you know, when I was in my 20s. So by the time I get to my 40s, it's like, you know, this is just another one. You know,
you're immune from it.
Yeah, largely.
Completely.
Yeah.
That's it. I think some people, it's naturally in them. I think other people, you know, they, you know, get into the system and they, you know, go to higher education, and, you know, their whole reason for being is engulfed in that, and they can't break out of it. It scares them to even look in another direction. I've got a mate who I'm, you know, trying to show a different way, shall we say, trying to wake up. And he's a very intelligent guy. He's more intelligent than I am, and he's been very successful in life in his own way. He was in finance originally, but I can't get him to see the other side of things. You know, it's like, it doesn't matter what I show him. And to me, it's almost like he doesn't want to go there because
it's because I think that's it as well, isn't it? It's that once they accept that could have fooled them, then the floodgates open.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And then it becomes a question of their own identity.
Yeah.
Who actually am I? If my identity was built around this, you know, this narrative.
Yeah. That's quite scary for some people.
It really is.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's you know.
And it's almost that thing, isn't it? That to know what's really going on, you have to unlearn everything you've been taught. And for some people, they just can't do that because.
But that's the red pill, isn't it? I mean, it's very cliched now, but the idea of when Neo wakes up to the fact that he's just an energy, you know, he's in a cocoon and is being used as a battery, and that his entire world was just a lie. And he comes out in the Matrix, that we used the term red pill, right, to describe that process of when you do wake up, that, you know, everything you thought to be true collapses, and then you have this identity crisis. Who am I? What am I? What's all this about? Which can be traumatic in and of itself.
It can.
Right. So maybe the people who were resistant to it have the foresight to be able to see, well, that's potentially what's going to happen here. And then it could send me off in a whole different path down my life that I may regret.
Probably because we were doing acid when we were 16. We don't care.
Thank the micro dot.
You know, you just kind of think, you know, the world is a very surreal place. You know, it's like, you know, so the fact,
and
you're not scared to look. You're not scared to go deep down that rabbit hole. You know, I don't like staying there for too long because it's pretty dark. My wife's good. She's very much. She's got an altar. You know, a place where she kind of, you know, she learned it when we were in Panama at the shamanic retreat, and it's a place where we do meditation and chant, and she'll pull me back to that. Say, you don't need to know all that. It's reconnect to spirit, to source, because ultimately that can be another trap. The rabbit hole can be another trap. I've got friends who are so immersed in that they're in a state of fear because they know what's going on, but it's a very frightening place to be. So
that was one of the benefits of moving here, actually, for me, was I was able to leave that all behind in England.
Right.
And all of that stayed on the other side of the channel, largely, right? And it was such a liberating experience.
To come here.
And leave all that shit over there.
Yeah.
And I was able to, you know, rediscover who I am, you know, an earlier version, if you like. You know?
Well, it's good to have that awareness of what's really going on. You need to be aware. But you know, when you're operating at a higher vibration, you know, that fear stuff is a low vibration and it bypasses you. You know, it's you're keeping yourself safe by staying in a high vibrational place and looking after yourself, mind, body, spirit. That's the way out the trap. You know, so that's the key.
So I've got another hypnosis, hypnotherapy, and hypnotherapist friend, Zoe Clues. I don't know whether you've heard of her. She's from London.
Yeah, I know Zoe.
She spoke out during COVID, and she faced a lot of flack.
You know, I've spoken to her on Facebook.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah, tell her you was on the show.
I will do, yeah. Have you had her on?
No, because I came here and it was too far. Maybe she come off for the weekend.
I've never met her face to face, but we've chatted online, and you connect with, you know, that was the one thing about what's gone on. You connect with other awakened spirits. And especially in the hypnosis world, there weren't many of us. There was Zoe, there was a few others, a couple of guys I really connected with deeply because you kind of realize you're on the same way. But other guys, you just thought, Jesus, this is hypnosis. You're not seeing it.
It's just, I think, you know, one of the scary things about hypnosis is that you become aware of how easy belief systems can be adopted, even if, you know, maybe they're not true belief systems or positive belief systems, but it seems that, you know, humans are vulnerable to belief systems either being imposed upon them or accepting ones that are untrue. And then when you realize you can change those belief systems through meditation, hypnosis, and all of the other techniques that we've discussed, you then start to ask yourself, well, who actually am I? If these belief systems can be changed at will, what is my core? Who am I? What is when we reduce the layers past this, you know, this baggage, this ballast? You know, it becomes an identity crisis in and of itself. It's like you're trying to find out who you are, what I am. You know, because nothing's true.
Well, that's a really good point because so many people go through their life and their identity is their personality and their achievements. not necessarily who they really are, their soul, their spirit. And, who was that teacher? I was trying to think of his name. There's a great teacher, Indian guru that lived, he died in the 50s, but most...
Oh, Krishnan Gurumati.
Similar to him. Yeah, but it'll come back to me. I'll remember it later. But his whole thing was that self-inquiry thing. Who am I? And really, spending time in meditation, going into that to really connect with your true self. And, it's such an important part of what we do and, what we're about. But, we put too much emphasis on our achievements and our name and, what we've done in this world. But really, if you do believe in, past lives and then that the soul lives on.
Do you believe that?
Yeah, completely. This is just a part of the journey, that when we pass on, we continue to live, and I think this life is an opportunity to raise our vibration to a place where that when we do exit this world, then, wherever our vibration is at that time, the next incarnation will match that. It'll be the same, so it's an opportunity almost to graduate. And to clear the karma, clear family karma, so that you're not playing out those things in future lives. And, so I'm kind of on that path now. Anything that comes up, any trauma that comes up, or any, falling out with anyone or a family member or whatever, not have too much of that these days. But if something comes up, then I want to clear it. I don't do the, sometimes the emotion comes up in the moment and you can do the blame thing. I did that because you did that. If you go beyond that and start to think, well, what was the trigger? Why did that trigger me? And you work on healing that part of you, then that's how you move on and you heal those traumas and those wounds. And, that's the opportunity to progress. But you have to have that awareness to be able to see those things, and that's the awakening. That's the awakening.
It's a funny term, personality. It's like, it's a legal term, right? Is in law, personality means, all of your movable property, all of the stuff you've collected throughout your entire life. It's called your personality, right? So when you die and they're trying to determine where your estate goes, they determine your personality and how it should be divided up. It's literally called your personality,
right?
So in the sense we're talking about it, it's that too. It's a collection of your beliefs and experiences and all of this, like, property almost that you've created throughout your life as baggage, or as what you think defines you, when actually it doesn't define you at all. It's just some clutter that you've picked up on the journey, and maybe it's give you a way to understand this this experience that we're having, which is absolutely mental, isn't it, in and of itself?
And also a lot of the spiritual knowledge and the spiritual wisdom that we should have access to at birth. Again, that's kept away from us, isn't it? You think of, was it the Dead Sea Scrolls were found in the 1950s, and they were supposedly this, going to bring us to a new state of enlightenment because there was so much in them that were going to awaken us, and there was, revelations in there, and it was going to be released. But what happened? It got squirreled away. It's in the Vatican. 90% of it is in the Vatican. Never got released. We got a few little tidbits from it, and a lot of that spiritual wisdom and knowledge that we should have at our fingertips has been taken away from us, or it's been by the mainstream. It's sort of marginalized, isn't it? You're a bit woo woo. I got a big book deal in 2008. I signed a book deal with Orion in the UK, and it was a golden opportunity. Suddenly I got this.
How did you get to the position where you got yourself a book deal?
So what happened was I'd been selling my recordings, cassettes and then CDs, and I literally used to distribute them myself into chain stores in the UK. I got super lucky doing the law of attraction. I was projecting out. They were going to be in all stores over the UK. And then I signed a deal with the BBC because they were the biggest audiobook company in the UK. And I'd sold about 1 million at that point. And the BBC said, you could get a book deal off the back of these sales. So I thought, okay, that'll be good. So I phoned up. I said, how'd you get a book deal? He said, well, you've got to get an agent. So I said, where'd you get an agent from? He said, there's something called the White Pages. It was a big manual. And so I got the White Pages and I went, okay, I'll ring them. And I phoned them up, and at first they would say, "Oh, you got to send a manuscript in." I said, "Oh, no, I got cut off. I was speaking to somebody in the new buying department. I got cut off. Could you put me back through?" It was kind of a way round. And they put me back through, and I left a message on an answer phone. And I said, "Oh, I've sold 1 million CDs up to now, and I've got a deal with the BBC, and I'd love to speak to somebody about writing a book." And the guy that became my agent walked past the office as that message got played, and he heard it, and he thought, "There's something in that. I'm going to meet this guy." So I went up to London. I met him, and he was a very down to earth guy. A lot of people in publishing come through university, and they're not working class, shall we say. But this guy was into football, and I was chatting away to him about football, and I got on really well with him. And I went around to all the big publishers, and I sat in the room, and I was projecting out this energy. He said to me, he said, "Look, if we get a deal for 20 grand for a couple of books, that'd be great." And within like about 3 days, I had Warner Brothers and Orion in a bidding war, and it went up to like 500,000. It blew my mind. And I was doing this projection all the way through it. And so I got this golden book deal. Wow. It was for 3 books. Well, it ended up being for 5. And but suddenly they wanted to push me down this very mainstream road. And I wanted to write about the things that were working for me, like the law of attraction, spirituality and projection and clearing trauma. And they sanitized the books completely. And it was a shame, because I had this golden opportunity on one hand, but I couldn't write the books I wanted to. And they became very sort of sanitized versions, and they didn't, they never got their 500,000 back. It didn't come back. And
unlucky for them.
Unlucky for them, but it was, it made me realize that.
So, when that happened, that amazing turn of events for you personally, how were you able to interpret that in your narrative? Did you think that, yeah, this is exactly what I've been seeing, this is what I've been visualizing, this is what I'm pushing? What were your internal thinking and feeling, as that happened for you? Because that's an amazing, landmark in your own narrative, isn't it?
It just made me believe, more and more that, what you create, the energy that you create within you, is something that the external world responds to. And it just gave me so much belief in, what you can...
The power of your own mind.
The power of your mind. Yeah, but the one thing I realized is that when, it's often like you hear bands say, they get the big record contract, and it's fantastic, amazing, but then they're in the corporate world.
They've got to deal with the record company, haven't they? So that's what the next part of the question was going to be. Yeah. So on the one hand, the power of your mind brought you to that moment in your life where you got the $500,000 deal.
Yeah.
Right. But the flip side of that coin is your mind wasn't able to protect you from the predatory nature of the publishing company. How do you look at that now in terms of your ability to understand how the human mind works? Is there something you'd do differently?
Yeah, I would. I wouldn't have signed that deal. Would I have signed that deal? I don't know. $500,000 is a lot of money. It was. I would have signed it on different terms, put it that way. That I didn't realize what I was walking into.
So you've got the experience now to be able to understand what would have happened after the signing of the contract and what you were actually signing away.
Yeah. That's it. I think you look at an artist like Prince. For the last 20 years of his life, he didn't have a record company.
He was trapped, wasn't he?
He knew that when he was signed with when it's Sony or whatever, he was trapped. He couldn't speak his mind.
But wasn't he trapped in the deal though? Whereas he couldn't make any music towards the end because he was trapped in the contract, and he had a dispute with Sony, I think it was.
So he came out as the artist formerly known as Prince. He was a symbol.
Changed the brand.
It was So he recognised that he was a very conscious soul, wasn't he? You see videos of him talking about chemtrails 15 years ago. It was amazing. But that's the thing. You realise now. I'm quite happy now, just selling lots of meditation recordings under the radar, no big profile. That's kind of suits me now, because, everything in the mainstream is so controlled, and, if you look at what happened during COVID, you know, the amount of rock stars that we once adored.
Oh, it was so...
You couldn't believe it.
It was heartbreaking for me.
Heartbreaking. You lose your idols as suddenly fakes.
Yeah, total fakes.
And
fakes.
And they're promoting this government crap.
Yeah.
I couldn't believe it. Somebody like Neil Young.
Well, rock and roll will never die. You killed it. You know, he killed rock and roll. You know,
Who's that?
Neil Young. You know, rock and roll will never die. It's his famous tune, isn't it? And then there he is. You know,
keep on rocking in the free world.
Yeah,
and he's down with Big Pharma.
I know, unbelievable.
It was insane, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I couldn't believe that those people, you know, who were supposedly, you know, against that authoritarianism and that oppression,
and that's why the audience transmits some of their sovereignty to the rock star.
Yeah,
because most people work a 40, 50-hour week. They have to go to work. They hate the boss. They're in a cubicle, you know, and they just have to go through the drudgery of life. And what they're able to do is try and have a little bit of this freedom, this non-domesticated life through these rock stars. And they're giving them, we'll give it to the man. We'll give it to the man. Fuck the man. I'm going to do it for you. I'm going to do it for you.
Yeah.
Right. And then when it push came to shove, they were just on hands and knees, prostrate, saying, fuck me in the arse. You know, they were just...
It was unbelievable, wasn't it? It was, I think it was Ian Brown.
He was one of the few.
From the Stone Roses.
Yeah, amazing.
He spoke out, didn't
Eric
he?
Clapton.
Eric Clapton. But Eric Clapton got the jabs.
Van
and then
Morrison.
He spoke out. Yeah, Van Morrison.
Right. Yeah,
Van
no,
Morrison.
He got the jabs, didn't he? And went, oh my God, what have I done?
Right said Fred.
Yeah. Who'd have called that one? That really wasn't on my bingo card.
Well, I know Fred. He's a friend, and he said, he was on an interview, and he said, well, he said, you know, he said when it all happened, he said we thought it would be like the Gallagher brothers and Lily Allen speaking out. He said, but no, it's come down to us, right? Said Fred, and it was unbelievable, wasn't it?
Well, I think it's clearly, you know, they've been told by their handlers, whoever it was that was paying their wages or giving them their royalties or whatever, you know, whatever contract that they had signed, because that was a thing that got revealed, wasn't it? There was a lot of secret contracts that got revealed, in which, like, you know, there's you know, non-disclosure agreements, and you know, if you want to keep this nice gravy train you get in, then this is what you got to go and do.
You want to have another big hit, you've got to, you can't speak. This is what you got to say, and it was so, you know, going back to my book deal. You know, it wasn't like that. It was a different time. It was before that all happened, but that was in place. That whole structure was in place. Editorial control. And anything you know, when I submitted my first book to Orion, you know, I remember they edited it. They edited a lot of the stuff out. And I said, well, why have you taken that out? It was, you know, I felt that was a strong part of the book, and now it's too woo-woo. And I remember them using those words. It was too woo-woo. But, you know, so for me, that was a huge disappointment. And then I didn't have the belief in the books that I was putting out. And, you know, I remember when the first book came out, because it was such a big deal, I walked into Tesco's and it was number 3 in the chart, you know, and it was suddenly I had a life-size cutout in W.H. Smith's. You know, you
still got it?
My family were drawing little tashes on it. But it was suddenly, there was golden opportunity, and I was with the biggest agent in London, and they were taking me around to the TV companies. But
so is that a bittersweet experience for you?
Yeah, it was, because if I'd been a straight goer, you know, like a Philip Schofield type, I would have been straight up there. It was all laid out for me, but they'd, you know, and it was amazing. I was booked on to go.
I mean, there's probably something in you that has rejected it. Because there's a level of phoniness that you have to demonstrate in order to get to those higher echelons, you know. And you know, your internal, you know, I
couldn't have played the game.
Factor, exactly.
I would have loved to think I'd have been an Ian Brown, you know, or Van Morrison. You know, I know I would. It's in my soul, you know. It's I always had this vision of, you know, getting onto one of those big TV shows and like just going for it. Well, I did a webinar one time on
like Joker when he's up against Robert De Niro.
you just come out. You know, I was on a big webinar, and there was about 1,000 people on this webinar on a big platform, and it was early on in COVID, and I could see all the bullshit that was going on and the lies and the fear they were creating. They were terrifying people, and I saw it all. So I just thought, I've got 1,000 people in front of me. I'm going to do my bit. I'm going to speak out. So I started saying on this webinar, look, don't buy into this fear. It's all bullshit. You know, they want to lead you into getting a vaccine. It's just, don't do it. And I just went for it. And the guy that works with me, he said that half of the people were saying, you know, I'm disgusted with you. I've got your meditations and you're a conspiracy theorist. You know, I'm not following you anymore. And but he said there was another half that was saying, keep going, we're with you. You know, and so I kind of was pleased with that. But I got banned from the platform, and it took me and I've had 11 million streams on that platform, and it took me 6 months to get back on it. You know, and I said, look, all right, I won't do it again. I won't speak out. But, you know, that was a massive blow, getting taken off a platform where I had so many streams. And
well, that's the thing, isn't it? It was, you know, what happened there. You ask yourself sometimes when you see some of the horrors that happened during communism, right, and how they were able to condition children to snitch on their own parents in Russia. Right? That's the level of conditioning or hypnosis, whatever you want to call it, that they were able to do, right? And you ask yourself, you know, why would they do that to their own people, and how were they able to pull it off?
Yeah.
And then during COVID, you were able to witness how they were able to pull it off.
Yeah.
You know, you had large numbers of people that were prepared to snitch on their neighbor to the police for breaking these imaginary rules that were just a figment of people's imagination that didn't even exist.
Yeah.
Right. And they were prepared to throw their neighbors into the state.
Yeah.
You know, and cause them all kinds of problems. You know? And it was like, that's how they did it. This is it.
It was horrible, wasn't it?
And I think, you know, I don't know if this is true, but I feel as if it is. It's like because we've had this materialist revolution where God has been sent to the, you know, the sin bin. He's off the pitch.
Yeah.
Right. Is that people who follow this kind of like atheist line is that they're terrified of death.
Yeah.
Because they believe death is the end. And that's it. We go into the ground and that's it. End of you.
Yeah.
And so therefore they have this fear.
Yeah.
Right. They have this fear of dying, right? To the point where whoever it is that's creating that belief system has the power to manipulate them if they use fear and this, you know, you're going to die if you don't get this vaccine. Right. And they was able to create this mass hysteria of people who were just, you know, terrified of, you know, opening the door because they didn't want it all to come to a crashing end. And I think that's kind of how the state is able to, you know, use its power to manipulate a population through propaganda because the state becomes God. The state is the creator.
That's what they want. They want to control everything, don't they?
Yeah.
And it's the deep state, isn't it? It's not the politicians. It's the deep state who are controlling their governments.
The financial oligarchy, you know, whoever controls the money controls the world.
Yeah. Yeah, it's that. And it was, they created that fear that people did irrational things, didn't they? I mean, you had that guy, Dr. Hillary, on British TV, on breakfast TV, saying that he actually said this: if you go into the sea, you should be wearing a mask. It's a fucking doctor on mainstream television. It was insanity. People did follow these people. They followed these doctors because they were in such a state of fear.
And they have rapport with the doctor.
Yeah.
Because, you know, we believe doctors have our best interests at heart, don't they?
People are hardwired to believe that.
Hardwired to believe it.
We talked about it before we came on, the Milgram experiment. If anyone listening to this has not seen that, go onto YouTube and look at the Milgram experiment. And it's an experiment that was done in the 1950s and it's been done a number of times since. Darren Brown's done it. And it's where they get people to sign up for an experiment where the doctor has to give them instructions and they have to follow the doctor's instructions all the way through to the end. And the people in the experiment are told they've got to ask questions of people on the other side of a partition. And if those questions are answered wrongly, the subject has to press a button that gives them an electric shock. And each time they get a question wrong, the intensity of the electric shock gets stronger. And throughout this experiment, people actually, you know, naturally get questions wrong. So the electric shocks get stronger. And obviously they're not real electric shocks, but the person that signed up for the experiment thinks they are. And you hear people on the other side of these are actors screaming in supposed pain. But these people who are in the experiment continue to press the button and increase. And even though there's a part of them saying, oh, look, I can't do it, I can't continue because they're in pain. the doctor tells you you've signed up for this experiment and you've got to continue. And over 50% of people who sign up for this continue to administer electric shocks, believing that they're hurting these people because the doctors told them to do it. And that's kind of summed up what happened.
Yeah,
completely.
And you know, if we can extrapolate that data, because if we know about that experiment, then the government surely knows about that experiment, and they paid for it, and I'm sure many others like that, so they could truly understand the psychology of populations when given orders by authority.
Yeah,
right now, during that crazy period, some of the threats that the government were making against us that were supported by 50% of the population who were like, yeah, do it, just do it. Yeah. Some of those threats, even though they probably didn't have any true intention to carry them out, the fact that they were making the threats of like, if you didn't get a vaccine, we're going to throw you in a camp.
Yeah.
Right. The fact that that was even on the table and being discussed as a potential option, and the fact that it had half the population going, throw them in a camp. That was similar to the Milgram experiment, because what happens when you get in the camp? What's next? Right? Is the electric shocks, or are they going to force you? No, all that was part of the psychology. And I thought, I don't want to be in any place where the government is threatening me with those kind of extreme authoritarian measures, and it's supported by half the population. That was what was so disappointing for me. Not so much what the state did, because that's what the state do. It's more the fact that our neighbor, our brothers in arms, were frothing at the mouth. For that to happen. And that's why I ended up here, and I'm so glad that we did.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because I've got some guy that follows me online who's he said to me that he grew up in Poland, and he said it was a fascist country when he was growing up. And he said, but this is far worse, what's going on now, because he said in Poland, when we grew up, he said, we all knew the government was the enemy, and the people were united together. And we were fighting against our enemy collectively, solidarity. He said, but in this, the government, the deep state have got everyone divided, and they know what they're doing. This divide and rule tactic has never been more evident than the last few years. And they got, like you said, they got people doing their dirty work. The people that were unconscious for free. And it comes back to that thing, we were talking about earlier about the fluoride in the tap water, that people are unconscious. And that's deliberate. They're making people unconscious and dumbed down because, when you're in that state, you're receptive to those suggestions, their government narrative, their hypnosis, and you follow it blindly. You put in a state of fear and you follow it. The government, they want people looking up to them for the solutions. And that's what we saw. We just saw a mass hypnotic episode. And those of us that saw through it were then fighting against the people that were just enforcing this government tyranny. It was mad.
It was a really, really grim time.
It was.
In some ways, I miss the fact that the mask wearers aren't wearing masks anymore, because I know who they were. Now they just blend back into the background again. So there's parts of COVID I'm nostalgic for that I miss.
It was kind of nice being the odd one out, wasn't it?
Yeah, it definitely was. Yeah, because look at you. Wait.
But you find your tribe.
Totally. Yeah.
That was a nice thing. Like I said to you, the hypnotherapists I fell out with online, but then I met people who were awake, and it was good. So it was, I had a thing in there was a vegetarian shop in town in Lagos where I walked in, and you think vegetarian shops, they were pretty cool. I didn't have a mask on. And all of a sudden I heard this guy shouting at me, you put your mask on. And he was so aggressive. He was one of those little Hitler types, you put your mask on. I thought, well, maybe he's the manager and he's terrified of his shop being shut down. So I said, do you work here? He said, no. I said, well, fuck off then. And, I'm a hypnotherapist who's written books, and I thought I'm going to have my first fight in 40 years. And I found myself, and I lost it, because all of it, I just all came up, and I was swearing at this guy, and he was swearing at me. And fortunately, my friend, she came over and she got me out and said, look, calm down, and I, yeah, okay. But it just all came up in that moment. And I thought, you bastard, what? You're just a little government enforcer. And that was the worst thing, these people, that they're the common enemy. They're your enemy as well, but he couldn't see it. You know, he just thought I was the enemy.
Matthias Desmet, the guy who popularized the mass formation hypnosis meme.
Yeah.
When I was chatting to him, he was saying is that those people, the little Hitlers that you were, just described, is that they're so deeply committed to it, right? That they get psychological benefits from it, right? So it's not fear they get from it; they actually get like a boost, like a boost in their ego, a reward, a reward, and that's what incentivizes them and motivates them to carry out these extreme measures, and it's not just like irrational thinking; it's actual, it's reinforced through positive intention.
And the government did that. They told them they were responsible. You're responsible. They're the selfish ones. We're the granny killers. We're the ones that, it was insane, wasn't it? No. I mean, I was on a podcast about a year ago, and it's lovely to be able to talk like this on this one. But I was on this podcast, and the guy was awake. He'd seen my posts on social media. And we had a great chat, real cool chat. It was a dance music station, but he was really into hypnosis. And I'd helped this guy sleep for years. He'd been listening to my recordings, so he got me on. And we got into a real good chat, and we kind of started talking about things like this. And it was a pre-record. And at the end of it, he said, look, halfway through, he said, look, I'm going to have to stop. He said, we've gone down a rabbit hole, and I'm going to have to cut this stuff out because they were governed by Ofcom. And he said, if we talk about this, we could potentially get our station shut down. And he was terrified of that. And it made me realize how one body like Ofcom can completely control the whole of the media. So as soon as you start speaking about vaccines or 9/11 or anything like that, they'll shut stations down. And he was terrified of it. And even though he was on side with it all, that's how they control the media.
Well, censorship, isn't it?
Censorship,
Because without censorship, I mean, propaganda requires censorship. Because propaganda needs to be the sole voice. Right? Or if there is opposition, that's controlled too. Right? But propaganda needs to be unchallenged. Right? It needs to be the dominant voice in society, and it allowed to be the hypnotic loop. It's it's the hypnotic loop for the masses to be able to take on board. Right? Now, if they have a contradictory message. People going, hang on a minute, that's not correct. I want to chat about this. I think there's some issues here that may need some debate so that we can resolve it by finding the truth. Right? So they don't want that.
No.
So that's where censorship comes in, is to squash the voice of the dissenting others that will challenge this propagandistic narrative that they need to enforce the agenda.
And people couldn't believe that the whole of the media was on board. And if every media all around the world is saying the same thing, people believed it must be real.
Well, it shows you how few people control the media. That they're able to squash dissent so efficiently and so effectively on a global scale.
And on social media. The big tech companies were doing it, weren't they? I was telling you earlier that I posted something about a doctor that was highly qualified doctor that was questioning the mainstream narrative and speaking out against the vaccines, just what he'd seen in his private practice. I posted that on Facebook, and I got banned from Facebook for posting what a doctor was warning us about. So it's that thing that, of course, the consensus is going to be pro-vaccine if you suppress the
counter voice.
It's going to seem like everyone's singing from the same
but they have to squash people who have authority within a field if they're a dissenting voice. So any doctors are far more dangerous to them than the common man like me. Right? It's because the doctor has a level of trust with the population in order for his message to carry more weight. So they're the ones that they had to get rid of quick.
And those doctors that spoke out, they have a lot to lose. They've got their careers, they've got their pensions, and I don't know if you saw Dr. Buttar.
Dr. Buttar. So.
He was a big voice at the beginning. He died recently, not long, and he was there's an interview of him speaking to a CNN journalist, and he was speaking out about the dangers of the vaccine, and this CNN journalist said, well, so what you're saying to me that I could be dead in a couple of years if I take this vaccine? And Dr. Buttar said, that could possibly happen, and this guy died. This journalist.
The journalist
died. But Dr. Buttar, he I don't know, it's one of those conspiracies we'll never know, but he died and he was a big voice. And a lot of doctors and people in the mainstream, a lot of people who've spoken out, journalists, have died young. There was that, I don't know if you remember a few years ago, there was that whole thing where these alternative doctors were questioning the mainstream narrative. And there were literally, these guys were in their 40s and 50s, a picture of health, practicing alternative medicine, but they had a big platform. And loads of them were dying, one after the other. And the law of averages tells you there's something really wrong if this amount of people who are speaking out are dying. So, I mean, that's another big threat, that if you've got a big platform and you speak out, that you could potentially be giving up your life, to do that. A lot of rock stars died young, the ones that were, again, exposing child trafficking and, a huge amount, so...
it takes a lot of balls, takes a lot of guts to speak out in this environment. Absolutely, especially the bigger your profile is as well.
The more influential you are, the more of a target you become.
Of course, they want to silence you and squash you so that you never speak again. But I'm so glad that it's in the past, and I'm so glad that we can look at it from a distance, and we're able to analyze it with perspective, and we're able to laugh about it a little bit as well, right?
Yeah,
because it was a really dark period, and I'm glad it's over.
Yeah, me too.
And I'm glad we're in much more positive times now, and I'm
and this is the Great Awakening. We're in the Great Awakening, so maybe this had to happen for people to awaken. And they say that thing that the world's not getting worse, it's just the veil is being lifted, and we're seeing more of what's really going on. So that it probably on a spiritual level it had to happen so that people do.
Well, I wouldn't have ended up here, and I'm so happy that I made that choice. Oh man, I really love it here, right? And it was a really, really good choice. It took me a while to come to the decision because I'd look every day. I'd look at the government website and find out where the restrictions were different, right? And I had a friend here in Algarve, and he was, all that nonsense was still going on in the UK, and he was sitting on a yacht and drinking champagne, and he's going, "It's great here. Why aren't you here?" So we're going there. Right?
Was that the reason you came to this place?
Because I was trying to make a decision, right? And I was checking the website each day to find out what the restrictions were, and they'd relaxed them here. And he was here sending me photographs and videos saying, "Look, it's cool." And so,
the rules were kind of a little bit similar to Spain here. But Spain, you had cops on the streets with guns. It was heavy there, but here, it was. The Portuguese are very laid back as a nation, aren't they? So it was lovely that the cops were pretty cool as well. So even though the rules were tough, they weren't enforcing them like they were in other places.
So how did you end up here in Algarve? What's your little narrative with ending up in this little corner of paradise?
So we left the UK about 8 years ago, and we went to Spain. Because we had friends there, and I was kind of familiar with the Costa del Sol, so we went there. But then we started to homeschool our kids, and in Spain they're quite strict on that. So we had a friend of a friend that lived here, and she was homeschooling her kids. So still the sun still shines 300 days a year here. So we came here, and I was into crypto, and the crypto taxes in Spain were high, whereas here they're zero still. So I thought that was another good reason. So we came here.
So how did you end up in Western Algarve? Was that because of the homeschool community?
It was because of the homeschooling, and there's quite a lot of homeschoolers in this area.
We homeschool our son, and that's one of the reasons why we ended up in Western Algarve. It's because people think,
well, our kids play on the beach on Wednesdays.
But people think that people who are ignorant of what homeschooling means think that homeschooling is your kid locked in a room, right? And he has to learn on his own. He doesn't socialize. He doesn't have any other kids to play with. But the reality is obviously a lot different than that. And there's homeschool communities in which families and groups all meet together with their kids. And they have this amazing life growing up on a beach in the forest. I wish I would have had that when I was growing up.
You look at our kids, the homeschool group we're in. There's kids of all ages there, but they all play together.
That's right.
You remember when we were at school? It was like younger kids are not irrelevant, and older kids but you always stayed in your year, didn't you? But in a homeschooling setup, the kids all gravitate,
which is so natural,
and the older boys look after the little ones, don't they? It's really nice. It's natural. Completely.
How did you come to the decision to homeschool your kids? Because that's quite an important decision to make, isn't it?
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was because we kind of saw what was happening in the mainstream school system and how it was kind of coming indoctrinated with a lot of woke ideology and that kind of thing. And we just made the decision from quite early on. You know, I was of the mindset a little bit more than my wife, to be fair. She was homeschooling all the way through, but I thought, they need to be around other kids. I learned being in the jungle, the law of the jungle. You know, you learn the rules that way. And so I thought my boys might need a bit of that. And, you know, to a degree, that's probably the one thing they're missing a little bit.
Yeah, a bit of street smarts.
A bit of street smart, yeah. But, you know, it's funny, you know, I look at my older boy now. He's 9 years of age and he plays the piano. He plays boogie woogie piano and he's so gifted. I'll show you a clip afterwards. He's a really gifted kid, and that's happened because we homeschool. We have a piano teacher that comes in once a week and he's learned to play the piano. You know, and because his mind's kept free, you know, he can solve the most complex Rubik cube. You know, those ones with 12 sides. He can solve that in like 4 minutes. Wow. He's very... So we've been able to bring out his natural talents and nurture him because he's getting that one-to-one. And we have a teacher that comes in 4 days a week, and she was a teacher back in Liverpool. You know, so she's very qualified in the sort of mainstream system, but she's awake. She lives up in Al Jazeera and she's conscious, and so she comes in 4 days a week, and so they're getting a good education. They're learning, you know, English and maths, and but we're taking them to jiu-jitsu and piano lessons, so they're getting a very rounded education.
Yeah, it's great. I mean,
and the homeschool meetups, you know, this is how we connected through that.
Totally.
You know, so you meet like-minded people, and I love that. I love that.
It's a bit of a filter in itself, isn't it?
Yeah,
you know, it's a filter. You know, and I think that's what's great about Western Algarve, all of Algarve, but Western Algarve, because that's what I know the most.
Yeah,
is that there is this real like collection of cool people that I'm really, really happy that I've met. I've got friends who are French and Italian and German and Cockneys now as well. I never thought that would have ever happened. But yeah, it's cool.
It is nice, the amount of people that you meet. It's a real melting pot for people that are sort of, you know, dropouts or spiritually minded.
It's like a refugee camp for Western Europeans who've woke up and gone, whoa, let's get somewhere safe.
Yeah, I heard that there's an energetic vibration in this area that draws people like that, because you've got people like Muji, you know, he's like the Rastafarian spiritual teacher that's got a community up beyond Al Jazeera.
Are you going to have to introduce me to him if you know him?
Yeah, he's a cool dude. I've never been up there, but he's like a, you know, well-known spiritual teacher, and there's a few people like him that have gravitated to this place because of the energy of the land. And there's something in that as well. You know, our souls call us to a place where we're, you know, we're connecting with the land that we're living on. There's a certain vibration that we're feeling that enables us to flourish. I learned that from a shamanic teacher down in South America. He said it's really important to live somewhere that you feel that energy, you feel that community and that energy from the land where you are going to, you know, flourish. And, you know, I wasn't feeling that in South London where I grew up. You know, it was just
I'm the same.
Chaos.
I was sorry to leave. I was sad to leave.
Yeah.
You know, but I don't regret it at all.
And probably like you know, you learned a lot from that. You know, you're streetwise and smart because you grew up in that.
Definitely.
And it's lovely to have that and to be in a place like this now where we are, you know, we're connecting with people with...
Like Neo, seeing the bullets come at you really slow.
It's good, isn't it? It's
been fantastic talking to you. Really enjoyed it.
You too. Yeah.
What's next for you? What have you got coming up? What's on the horizon? What fantastic new projects are you plotting and scheming?
I am writing my next book, and I haven't got a publisher this time, which is kind of nice. So I'm writing the book, and then once it's finished, I'm going to get an agent and then say, right, this is the book.
What's it going to be about?
So it's called Raise Your Vibration. And it's kind of a lot of the things we've talked about on this podcast about how you raise your vibrational energy to a point where you're immune from the matrix control. Because I've spent the last 20 years getting further and further out of it and becoming more sovereign, more in my own power, and you know, in a place where, you know, things do get really bad, I've got a plan B. And so it's kind of about that. It's about everything I've experienced over the last 20 years and how other people can do that, you know, to get fit and healthy in mind, body, spirit.
Wicked.
And to live a free, sovereign life.
Yeah.
So that's the book. Yeah.
I look forward to that.
Yeah, thank you.
And if people want to find you online?
So the best way to access my recordings, I've got a lot of free ones on YouTube. So type my name into YouTube and you'll find my free recordings. I've got a main app called Ultimate Hypnosis that's on the App Store. And it's got 250 of my recordings. And I do webinars from within that app. And my main website is glennharrold.com.
Are you on any social media platforms?
Yeah, on all social media, actually. Okay. On Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. I even signed up on TikTok recently and just put out videos on there. Yeah,
I'll put it all in the description so people can hook up with you if they want. And that's what I meant to ask you. I seen a video of you earlier. I was watching some YouTube stuff and who's your team? Who's your football team? Because you still play football, do you?
Yeah.
Where's that? Because I'm up for a game. You say I was trying to find an older, like over 40s game of football.
It's over 50s.
Over 50s. Yeah. I can be a ringer.
Yeah. So I kind of got back into that. It's Odi Asher.
Oh, okay.
So you know the football stadium there?
Yeah.
We play in that every.
Is it walking football?
Walking football. So it's you can only walk, but you know, we still have a little bit of running. Sometimes we have a ref, and you blow up if you run. But it's 3 touches, no contact, and I love it.
Yeah.
I still get that same feeling. If I bang in a couple of goals, you get that same feeling you did when you were a kid.
Yeah.
You know, I love it. I've got a new lease of life, and I play in tournaments out here, and I play for other teams in Spain. I absolutely love it.
Because I've just got my son he's been into it for a while, but I've had to take him to the next level. And I was taking him to the football, and it wasn't enough. He needed more time on the ball.
Yeah.
So I've decided to start taking him every day, right?
Right.
So I've taken him to a little concrete pitch that I've got in Bagao.
Yeah.
And I haven't played football since I was, in my late 20s, early 30s. And I love it. I've been love training with him. I'm loving passing the ball, and I'm loving, watching him shoot. And
you get back into it through your kids, don't you?
Yeah,
yeah.
Right. So we're going. We play for Algarve Football Club, I think it's called.
Yeah,
run by Bruce. And
Bruce, I took my boys up there.
Yeah.
So we were playing in his little Saturday group.
That's right. That's where we
go. He's a great guy, isn't he?
Yeah.
He's really good with the kids.
Yeah, he's great with the kids.
You need to find a coach who's got that empathy, and you know he can be strict with them, but he also gets the best out of them.
He's really good. Yeah. So we just had Donnie had a big match on Sunday. He stepped up an age range, and all of a sudden he was the smallest kid. You know, so he was a little bit nervous, but it was great. You know, the whole idea of families going to watch the kids play football on a Sunday, like we were when we were growing up, and it was quite nostalgic, and I loved it. I thought I need to get a game of football in.
Yeah.
And then I seen a video with you, and I thought, where's he playing football?
So how old are you?
47.
So a couple
of years, we'll sneak it in.
I'll ask the guys. They normally you should be over 50 to play it regularly. But if you wanted to come along now and again, that would be fine.
All right.
And
on that note,
Glenn,
thanks so much, mate.
Thank you, Lawrence.
Thanks for coming in. Really appreciate it. Cool.
Yeah.